That is what I have always understood to be the essence of anarchism. The conviction that the burden of proof has to be placed on authority, and that it should be dismantled if that burden cannot be met. Noah Chomsky.
Bending, Not Breaking, Season 6, Episode 13, Venom of the Red Lotus. And welcome back to another episode of Bending, Not Breaking. I'm Sunshine.
And I'm Ben.
And we are at the last episode of this season.
It went by fast.
It's super fast. And then there's only one season left. And then what?
And then what? I don't know.
Comics, books.
I mean,
We'll cross
that line
We'll
when we get there.
cross that portal to the spirit world when we
Maybe
get
we'll
there.
start over. Who knows?
Yeah. Oh man, I can't believe we're at the last episode. But because it's the last episode, we decided to make sure that it was a great last episode. And so to make that happen, we got a little special guest, don't we?
We sure do.
Ben, who do we have with us today?
Let me introduce to everyone listening the glorious Alex Fine. Alex Fine is our guest today. He utilizes he, his, him pronouns for everybody to know, and he received his undergraduate degree from UNC Chapel Hill in linguistics and German literature, which eventually led to him to pursue a joint PhD in brain and cognitive sciences and linguistics. He's worked as a behavioral scientist, studying how humans understand language, which is super cool. More recently, building on his Zen Buddhist practice, Alex has begun training as a chaplain. He completed a semester-long internship as a chaplain at Duke Hospital and is now applying to chaplain residencies and completing his training at the Upaya Zen Center in New Mexico. Alex, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you both very much for having me. I'm doing just fine. Yeah.
Just fine. I love it. I love it.
Alex, Ben had relayed to me that you might have an interesting journey of how you started watching Avatar and the Legend of Korra. Is this something you started as a kid, or is this a more recent thing?
Much more recent. Ben and I knew each other at Duke. Ben also trained as a chaplain at Duke Hospital. And we got to talking. We worked on we worked on two different units in the hospital overseen by the same senior chaplain, and got to know each other that way. And Ben mentioned the podcast and asked if I would be interested, and I said yes. And then I started watching. So I started watching The Legend of Korra, and then realized that there was a whole other show called Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I went back because of various neuroses and attempted to watch all of that before starting Korra, but then I realized that Ben would probably never speak to me again if I insisted on making it all the way through. So I've seen like half of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I've seen Korra up through the end of season 3. And I actually, until maybe 2 days ago, I thought that this was actually the series finale, and so I felt all this pressure, but it's just the season finale, because as soon as the episode ended, season 4 episode 1 started playing automatically on Netflix the way it does, and I was surprised but also kind of relieved that I don't have to carry the burden of the series finale.
I want to be very clear to everybody listening is that I did not make Alex go and watch everything. I said you only have to watch the one episode.
That's true, but that's just not in my nature to just watch one.
Yeah, but if there's a show you're going to watch all of,
yeah,
it's not a bad show to watch all of, you know?
No, it's not. No, I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
And so today we are talking about Venom of the Red Lotus, the season finale.
Whew.
It's a lot.
There's a lot going down.
But weirdly enough, when I give a recap, it doesn't feel like that much. So,
yeah, every time.
But before we jump into the actual meat of the conversation and talk about the lens and what's happening, I've got to do my part because I wasn't here to do it last week.
Yes.
I've got to give the 30-second recap.
I'm so excited for this.
All right. So, Ben, will you get 30 seconds on the clock?
I sure will.
And will you count me off so I can quickly do a 30-second recap?
I sure will. On your mark, get set, go.
Zahir tells Korra how he's going to kill her, and projection Jinora sees this and then tries to get the groups together to escape. And the Red Lotus poison Korra, and Team Avatar shows up, and a fight happens. And then there's more fighting, and then some fighting happens, and then there's more fighting. And then Zahir almost kills Korra, but Jinora uses the power of friendship to send Zahir back to Kansas. That's a Tornado Wizard of Oz joke. And then Korra starts the very
5
long
seconds.
process to recovery, and Jinora gets her tattoos.
I
Wow.
feel like you kind of copped out a little bit there.
There's so much fighting. What do you want
could
me
have
to
been
say?
more descriptive. You could have said
It's
Bolin and
electric.
Mako did some things. Like there could have been a little bit more description.
I feel very content with the way that I've presented the material.
I guess it's
get
fine.
into
You
it.
made me chuckle.
I feel good about it too, but the fighting was interesting to me because I think is it the first time in the show that someone has actually died? Well, no, the queen of the Earth Kingdom died,
Yeah,
But-
that's
but
probably the first time.
but there's been some really intense fighting, and no one has ever died. But
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah,
Explicitly.
until
that's
now,
like
yeah.
well, because then there's this season definitely happens, right? Because even Plea is off screen.
Yeah.
They just very closely cut it at the right
Yeah.
time.
Zahir's
Zahir's
firebender
Yeah.
that was on the team, on the squad that could shoot bombs
Right.
also died.
that's right. But this,
But
it's
yeah, but
still
this- but
just
this one-
this season though.
getting electrocuted and the screams is
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, that was intense.
That was rough.
It's a whole lot of like Ursula getting stabbed by a ship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's your favorite, isn't it?
It's very present in mind. She's terrifying.
Yeah.
Again, it goes like Ursula, Ko,
Uh-huh.
Ursula again,
Yep. Keep going.
Annie Wilkes.
Yeah. Notice that everybody, I want to remind you that Sunshine loves horror.
And Ursula terrifies me more than any horror movie I've ever seen.
Yikes.
Yeah, here we are. So let's talk. We're talking through this episode through the lens of authority. And Alex, that was a lens that you chose, right? And so help
Yes.
me understand when you say authority, what does that mean?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have a really generally applicable abstract definition. I guess I think of authority as having to do with the power to make decisions or permission to make decisions or exert power in some way that is like socially licensed. So there has to be consent, or at least that's maybe a reasonable working definition to start with, because it's something that kind of permeates the show, right? Like every season is really about some challenge to the Avatar's authority in some way, right? And then
Yeah.
and then there's sort of intersecting authority. There's Korra's authority as the Avatar, which is kind of limited in surprising ways, given that she's on the one hand very powerful, on the other hand she can be exiled from Republic City because the mayor has authority to do that. And a lot of the characters' journeys are kind of about their attempts to negotiate, or their attempts to kind of figure out which sources of authority they want to align themselves with. And I also think that we can get into all this separately, but I also think that the way the show responds to the questioning of authority is sometimes kind of disappointing. Like it's
Interesting.
The Equalists in the first season, I thought like, well, maybe they're going to eventually explain like why. I mean, as someone who's totally new to this universe, it does seem a little bit unfair that some people can bend and other
Sure
people's
does.
can't. That's a really big disparity. And like the Equalists, maybe they have a point, but I felt like that never really got acknowledged. And then also in this season, the Red Lotus, I was trying to figure out like why this guy was so evil.
Yeah.
Until at the end, it's like, it's kind of this heavy-handed thing where he explicitly says, Zahir explicitly says, I think, that that they're allied. Well, actually, he doesn't say it. The show kind of draws this parallel between Zahir and Vatu. So there's like the anarchist and then like the principle of like chaos and disorder, and those aren't really the same thing. to me.
Yeah.
So
It's an interesting take. I'm finding the difference between authority, power, and an influence almost feel like they're interrelated here. And it seems like authority, when it's used in the way of authority, which to me goes exactly kind of what you said, like it's the power or right to give orders, to make decisions, and what I think it comes down to is enforce obedience. Like when you have the power to enforce, that's when it feels like an authority statement. Like power over seems like authority, whereas influence is different. And John Maxwell is a leadership thinker out there that I have read a lot of his books, and talks about the difference between power and authority and influence, and says that influence is what you really want as a leader, because it's the ability to make change, right? It increases. It's all based off of relationship, whereas authority is like, this position I have gives me the power, versus my relationship with you allows me to suggest. And I think that what's happening with all of these villains is an attempt at a grasp at authority, when in reality they're using power over without it being socially given, except by the few people are surrounded by. Sunshine, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, it was interesting to hear the concept of consent and how that plays into authority, because I think there are moments where consent is, like, people have to consent that this person is able to make these decisions. But I like that you've lifted up that it doesn't mean everyone consented to allow that individual is able to kind of make those decisions. And so, who has authority? Well, clearly Zahir has authority within the Red Lotus, and starts to build that influence in the Earth Kingdom before he leaves. But Korra is certainly not giving him authority or consent to do the things that he's doing. And so how does that play in those moments? And so it's super interesting.
Well, in the Earth Kingdom, I thought that he would, maybe I'm misremembering, I thought that he was kind of like the Joker, where he just like kind of got everything, totally upside down and then left.
Yep.
And that was what he wanted.
Which he does, right?
Yeah.
Certainly, because there are people who come out of the cells under the Earth Kingdom and they're like, I love this guy, right?
Yeah.
And so it's who is giving consent and who has the power and control to give consent, right? And and how does that play?
Well, it's interesting because in this, I haven't seen, like I said, well, one thing that, just as an aside, I remember, I don't know who said this, but one thing that has stuck in my mind over the years since I heard this is that the definition of a state is the entity that has a legitimate monopoly on the use of force, or a government, definition of a government, that kind of came to mind when you were speaking earlier, Ben, but I haven't seen, Ben didn't give me time to finish all of Avatar: The Last Airbender, so I haven't seen all of it, but in this series, every season is about a challenge to the Avatar's authority, and I never get. But what's funny about it is, like, everyone, it's implicit in that the Avatar does something really important, but we never get to really see what the Avatar does, because the whole show is just about the Avatar fending off challenges. So
yeah, and it's interesting that, like, it is about the Avatar trying to, and I'm going back to this word enforce, because that's what authority that's the word that kind of separates it from the others for me. Whenever the Avatar tries to enforce things, we always see it fail initially, because of a lack of power, right? And that's not necessarily the entire reason, but the reason these villains, so to speak, quote, quote, villains, are able to get away with what they do is because they have immense power to make change because of their abilities, right? Zahir would not be where he is if he did not get airbending, right? And neither would have Amon. Amon would never have been able to do anything that he did without his bending, and the Unalaq would never have been able to. And so it's interesting to me that power, like, it's the cliche, right? When you have power, the only problem is it leads to wanting more power, and this grab at authority. And so I'm still, I guess, trying to parse out the difference between, I guess power is neutral, authority is trying to wield your power to enforce rules. How does that sound? What's missing?
I doubt that there's I mean, I think we use the word in different ways, right? So like we talk about,
Yeah.
you know, and it's used in positive and negative ways. So in some, you know, when Ben and I, when you and I were in the hospital, people would talk about pastoral authority, which was usually used in a positive way. It was like if someone asks to see a chaplain and you show up as a chaplain, you have a certain kind of authority that can be used to very positive effect in that situation. You can, you know, invite the people in the room to pray or have a moment of silence, and you're kind of given that authority by virtue of this role you have. It would be an abuse of authority for you to go and do it when you're not invited to do it. You know, to go into someone's room and say like, hey, you know, get up, let's pray. You know, that would be, or to go and say like, if you don't pray before surgery, you know, God's not going to let you recover. You know,
That's what we call spiritual abuse.
yeah, and it's an abuse of authority, right? It's like you get entrusted with this role, and then you use it in ways that it wasn't intended. But we also talk about, you know, authority in more negative ways lately. You know, especially talking about like the police. But it, you know, even with police, it's interesting because, you know, they only have authority. Does an off-duty police officer have authority?
Yeah.
And if so, what kind? So it's sort of like defined very relationally.
Yeah. Again, it comes down to role for me. I'm thinking about just the role I think that you're pointing us to is important. All right, so here's what I want to do. I would love to, let's go to a moment in this episode that is all about authority that raises that up for you. And I'm happy to offer that to whoever speaks first.
Yeah, I think for me, the authority that comes with getting the tattoos is an interesting, is the symbolism that comes with that, right? Like this, you are now a master, you now have the tattoos that show that, and so with that comes an assumed authority in certain ways. You are now an authority around airbending, right? And so, and how that's such a beautiful moment. Arguably
Makes
one
me
of my
cry
favorite
every time.
moments in all of the Avatar universe. That's one of my favorite moments. And it's this person who's been working towards this and has been studying and really, and then we see the practical usage of that mastery in this episode. And so to then see, it's just a positive sense of authority, because it's weird. I feel like authority can be, there's bad authority and there's good authority, right? And and so this is a real positive moment of someone kind of attaining that authority.
Well, piggybacking on that, a moment immediately neighboring that is Tenzin's kind of seemingly spur of the moment decision to announce then and there, right? You see him like in the scene before that, kind of having a moment where he gets an idea, and then when his daughter is being ordained or whatever, he announces that the airbenders are going to return to their nomadic roots, and then basically fill in for the Avatar. While she's and so Tenzin is a really interesting case because in developmental psychology, there's a distinction between authoritative parenting versus authoritarian parenting. So an authoritative parenting is considered a positive attribute of a parent. So authoritative parents like recognize, I'm the parent, you're the child, that gives me a certain amount of power.
Boundaries.
And yes, boundaries, exactly. And it's like that is very liberating for the child, because it's like there's this whole class of things you don't have to worry about. And sometimes it's going to piss you off, but like ultimately it's really good that like you just don't have to worry about these things. Whereas authoritarian parenting is more like domineering and
my way or the highway.
My way or the highway. And Tenzin's story has been in a lot of ways like him trying to negotiate
back and forth,
those two, right?
Yeah,
like not knowing when to be not. I think his intention is to be authoritative and to kind of wear the mantle of his dad, but sometimes he veers towards authoritarian, And so I thought it was interesting when he made that announcement. And then I was kind of struck by Korra's face when Janora is being.
This is a moment.
Yeah, it's a real moment. Like she doesn't look unambiguously, moved. I wouldn't necessarily. It doesn't seem like a simple thing where she's like proud of her little sister.
It's really complicated, right? It is. She's living in this space where she was just severely traumatized, right? And what trauma does to the brain is terrifying, and it reduces us. It blocks people off. It turns us away from others. It's very isolating. In this moment, it's really hard to be happy for your little sister in name, right? And really in act too. So it's fascinating what our bodies do to try to get us to heal. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to spend too much time on that because there's more to spend on that in the next episode. But like there's so much to talk about with trauma, but I'm not sure how it's connected to authority. So I'm gonna pivot back to what we started with.
Sure.
With Janora and then Tenzin.
Mm-hmm.
The symbology, right, I think is worth attending to. The symbolism of tattoos and also of titles, I think, makes a difference. So when Janora is dubbed a master, it reminds me of when, okay, I have my PhD in, or hey, I have my certificate in. It conveys a baseline understanding of the topic, right, that I think is one of those things where I've wanted to really kind of get rid of, because who has the authority to give those things away, right? And who has access to do those things, especially when it comes to education in the United States, right? So when people are dubbed as, given these things with PhDs, often it's because they were in a position to be able to afford to do the things that got them there. And so certifications and authority often is restricted from those who do not have the ability to pay for it, or whatever else,
or the time, or whatever,
right?
the boundaries,
whatever the
be.
constraints are. And so I think it's interesting for us to kind of think about just how often authority is based off of things that are outside of the control for most people to get.
This is nepotism.
Yeah, in a way.
I mean, like, there's one Air Master.
It's his daughter.
And so,
right?
And so, access is a big part of that, and proximity is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the ability to have access or be close to those things, then you're less likely to do it, right?
It's no accident that Janora is the youngest airbending master in history, right? Because the context of that is that Tenzin was the only airbending master for a hot minute before she was born, and he has the burden of making sure that she is prepared for the next generation, right? And being surrounded by that, and then put into this position where she had to utilize that airbending to survive and to keep the world safe, is going to exacerbate her growth, right? So that it's really hard to separate how young she is from all of the other things that contributed to her becoming a master so early.
Which doesn't, clearly that doesn't take away from her accomplishments, right? Like,
no, absolutely not.
She's amazing.
Yes.
And we can also recognize, this is where it's not one or the other, and we can recognize that proximity and access to do those things made this possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
other people
easy to
don't
find.
have those.
Yeah, I think it's probably easy to find parallels in real life, right? Like, your brain surgeon worked incredibly hard to become a brain surgeon, and thank goodness he's there to perform surgery on your brain. Was it helpful that his parents were also surgeons? Yes.
Yes. Yes, it was.
but it's still good that he's there. So yeah, I mean, I think that they're there. So I think with Janora, the same thing came to mind for me, right? That she would not have been in this position had she not been Tenzin's daughter. But of course, the show makes it pretty clear that she is a bona fide master. So like
she's exceptional.
She does have the thing that she needs. But yeah, there is this tinge of, not entirely democratic means of getting it, which is
well, and again, I think what you're helping us grapple with is that that's okay, especially in this situation, right? I think when it becomes not okay is when other people are not given that opportunity. Right? And what they're actively doing is trying to get as many people as possible to this point. And so I think that that's definitely a part of the conversation, is that it would feel a lot worse if the goal was not to get everybody to this point.
Right. Well, it's also interesting because I think a lot of times in our lives we associate experience and age and things like that with the authority that comes with that, right? So like you go into a job and you're working with someone who's been doing that role for 30 years, we say that's the authority. Well, Janora's shows up and captures it here, which is something that many people who have more experience were not able to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that can also show that like just because someone is new into a space does not mean they are not credible.
Absolutely.
In whatever that space might be, or whatever the subject matter might be.
I think the thing that stood out with Janora, what she seemed to do on at least two occasions that Tenzin didn't teach her, was to tap into the collective ability of airbenders working together, which makes her kind of an interesting authority in this case, because the two examples that come to mind for me, of course, there's the really salient example at the end where they create the tornado, but then before that she also worked with her little brother and the woman whose name I forget, that Bolin was Opal, but Bolin's latest crush. They work together to blow the keys off the guard's belt, etc. So she seems to have this really keen sense of like the collective need and the collective power, which makes her, I think, kind of interesting. But one thing I wanted to just throw in was there's a really talking about like the unfairness with which authority is sometimes propagated. With Janora, it kind of, like we've said, it makes sense. But what about Korra, the Avatar, being reincarnated as the daughter of a chieftain?
Yeah.
Like, is that
it certainly makes
an
it more
isolated incident? I guess the first Avatar was kind of like a street urchin. So it's not like this thing. It's not like this thing where
rat.
I guess it would be more kind of annoying or boring or something if like the Avatar always just happened to be born into like noble blood, but I don't think that's what happens in the show.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence to the contrary in all of the Air Nations with all of the various avatars that we know about. Wan certainly being one of them, but also we have more from like
even Kyoshi, right?
Kyoshi was born an orphan and was raised as an orphan, and I don't want to give too much away in case you end up reading it.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
There's whole books.
Yep.
There's so much more.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so I have a moment that I want to talk about.
No, we actually don't have to. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I want to talk about Raiko. So President Raiko, leader of Republic City, last time they engaged between Korra and Raiko, he banished her from Republic City. And now that she has done all of the work to make sure that the Red Lotus is no longer a threat to the world, at least they are no longer at large, we now have Raiko, who is like, oh, I'm so glad you're back. Let me be the first person to, grovel to you and thank you for your service. And then I just talk about power that is gained and kept in a way that feels icky is Raiko. We learn in the comics, spoiler alert, we learn in the comics that he's kind of dirty when he wants to maintain power.
How dare you?
Yeah, he's Ely.
He definitely makes some grody decisions that I would not want in a leader, that is very reflective of politics. And so I just think that this looks like an example here of an opportunist authoritarian in a way.
Playing the game.
Yeah, playing the game.
Yeah, there's no spine behind it.
Yeah.
It's just like whatever is expedient.
What's going to make me look the best and set me up the best for the future? That's what I'm going to do.
It's pretty problematic.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And isn't that also, like, not too uncommon?
Super common. Yeah. Okay.
I have one more moment.
Good.
I think Bolin is possibly a sort of like anarchist model in this show. He's the only
Interesting
character when all this stuff is happening. The main thing he's concerned about is making sure that Opal knows what a good job he did. Right. He's always got some
Priorities,
crush.
Bolin.
He's really in his body. You know, he goes after Opal. It made no sense for him to go after the twin, the daughter of Unalak in the last season. You know,
Desna Nesna. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's the only one
Eska.
who seems to not have Eska. I think that's right. You know, Mako is this like bootlicker fascist cop. I'm just joking.
I mean,
no, he kinda is.
He just needs to learn.
Yeah, and you know, everybody in the show is like so hung up on like how they're going to have prestige in some way, right?
Mhm.
But not Bolin. I
Yeah.
mean, Bolin kind of like has this narcissistic.
he already
bout
had that
with-
stage.
Yeah, he's like in the movies, but it's like there's nothing strategic about it, right? It's all just
Yeah.
like, this is awesome. I love this attention. Everybody's looking at me. So when he had his moment with Opal at the end there, that was kind of. It occurred to me that he's the only one who has not been sort of angling
Yeah.
for something this whole time. Asami, you know, is like the heir to a fortune and wants that. To
I liked
keep
the way
going.
you phrased that. You said he's very in his body, which I think is a very apt description of that. I think it's super interesting. So you're kind of focusing on this moment with Opal, right? I want to point us to another moment with Bolin between him and Ghazan in this fight that I thought was particularly interesting.
Mhm.
Ghazan, the authority on lava bending, right, is, you know, saying, hey, remember that last time we fought? And Bolin's like, sure do. Guess what I can do now? And then he has the smug look on his face, and then he winks, at Ghazan, right?
Yeah.
And I found, I don't think I'd ever noticed that wink before until rewatching this time, because it never, like, stood out. But it really stood out this time because this is me conveying to Ghazan that, hey, I'm an authority on this now too. And
That little wink.
I mean, it's interesting though. Like we act differently in the face of someone trying to enforce us to doing something when we have power to push back, right? And so this kind of authority that he has allows this clash now between two powers that be, two authorities, so to speak. And it's interesting to me that to watch this happen because Ghazan leverages the real only authority he really truly has, which is the authority over his own life. And when he realizes that he's going to get beaten, he's like, nope.
I'm not going back.
He takes the whole thing down. I'm not going back.
He does like a honor suicide, ritual suicide kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, part of me in my headcanon actually thinks that he, like, tricked everybody, thinks, like, he actually is going to escape and go live as a hermit off in the woods.
It's a real Scarlet Witch moment.
If you didn't see it happen, it didn't happen.
Yeah. And we certainly
although,
didn't see it.
like, we saw
That's
some people
certainly
get
my rule with the
electrocuted.
That's certainly my rule with the MCU is if you don't see it happen, it didn't happen.
But yeah, that's my headcanon. But the main thing I wanted to lift up is this authority over one's life and the choice one can make to take it, which is a choice.
It is a choice,
Yeah,
but
we should probably like put a content warning in front of this episode. I guess if you've watched it, you know what's coming. But there's a lot going on in this that we are grappling with.
What I wanted to, you mentioned trauma earlier. Is it okay if I? Well, you said you kind of want to move on from that, but I was curious about why. One question that came up, and we don't have to talk about it if you don't want. But Korra, it's true, is depicted at the end of this episode as like deeply traumatized, which is interesting because last season, she went into a parallel dimension and literally battled evil itself.
Yeah.
and was fine. But now she's so I'm wondering like what the narrative justification for that is to finally.
I have so many thoughts on this. I'm hesitant because it's such a large conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, we only have X amount of time.
I think well, and what I love about this is that we get to see more of this in next season, in the beginning couple of episodes, actually really throughout the whole season. Next season is Korra's journey with this trauma, and that is something that
it's kind of compounded on itself.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the answers that I give in to that question is,
don't really do a trauma the first time. It will continue to compound.
It's she struggled with Amon. She had PTSD from that. She struggled with it. She has lived memories of working through her time with Amon, and then she lost all of the avatars. That was really tough. Her connection, and then it just compounds and compounds to where it feels like this
she didn't
time
lose them.
They were taken. Thank you for that reframe. That's really important.
Yeah, that was
taken.
brutal. That was really brutal. That was probably the most brutal moment in the show.
Yeah, I mean, yes, is bad, and then I think that it just has compounded to the point where her body is saying no more. I think that her body is, the body keeps the score, so to speak, and I think it is
exactly.
it is coming to take its penance, right? But yeah, I'm really excited to dive into this with some trauma experts next season. As we tap into more of that. So sneak peek for next season, y'all.
All right. Anything else we want to jump into before we maybe take a little break? But any other moments that certainly kind of lend to authority and that we want to make sure we speak on?
Nothing coming to mind for me.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to this lovely conversation on authority. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to come right back into your ears with some couple of new segments. Not new, but like new to the episode. Next segment's coming soon.
Wrap it up, Penn.
Dang.
We'll take a break, and we'll be right back. Back from our break. I hope y'all enjoyed those couple of minutes.
I sure did.
We're going to jump straight in to Twee-in-Law. What is something that pulled us in or pushed us away?
So I'm going to start because I know that one of you is probably going to say it, and I want to get it first. So every time I watch this episode, I start crying at the end when they as soon as the ceremony starts, I just start welling up because of how much has gone into this moment. And I'm thinking about Korra, who has just gone through so much trauma in her life and is just ridiculous in this wheelchair, and this single tear that comes down her face. So really this whole scene is, I live for this scene, and so that is what pulled me in for sure.
Well,
and then, what? Go ahead.
Sorry, no, you please finish. Sorry.
So, and I think what I want to pick for what pushes me away is, I really get frustrated with Zahir in this episode, because he goes from this, and this is indicative of a lot of things, but he starts out giving this like merry band of brothers Shakespearean speech, and he is all about it, and he's in full control. And it's really interesting, as soon as he is out of control, as soon as he has been captured, he loses it in a way. And that is like so real, right? I can't do anything else, and then he just starts laughing and gets a little bit maniacal, and I just, that it's too real, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. So it pushes me away in that regard, even if it's accurate.
It makes me feel like he's like the dude at the bar that gets rejected, all calm and cool, and the moment they're told no, starts to be like, what? You're terrible. You're bad. You know, so like that's what he reminds me of in this episode.
Yeah. All right, Alex, what about you? What's your push? What's your pull?
All right, I'm going to give my pull, and it's the same as you, but I'm going to frame it slightly differently. So it's
I love it.
It's not utterly predictable. So specifically in the ceremony when the new airbenders start bending the incense.
Yeah.
You know, and that to me, that was actually the moment where I got choked up, because those people have been on such an amazing journey, right? Where they weren't they weren't able to bend before. Suddenly they can, and now they're working together. They came of their own accord, right? Because at first Tenzin was trying to kind of Shanghai people into the airbending temple, and then these people came because they saw the power of the airbending, practice. And also, as someone who practices Zen in a formal way, I've learned the power of healthy ritual, and there's lots of incense in Zen rituals, and lots of people kind of dressed the same way, doing the same thing at the same time, and kind of using their bodies to create, to kind of express their shared intention. And so that was like a really powerful demonstration of that, and it really got me.
Here.
And the music is so good. Like they're playing like the Avatar theme or whatever. Yeah, it's just and I guess what pushed me away, this is just kind of like a quibble with the way this episode unfolded. I got pretty tired of the fighting.
Lots of fighting.
Yeah, especially the duel between Korra and Zahir, I felt just kind of went on and on and on. And maybe there's a reason for that, and maybe that has to do with why she's utterly spent this time.
Yeah.
Unlike before. But I don't know. I felt like at a certain point during that fight, I was like, okay, we got it. Like,
enough.
This is we get the point.
Well, thank you for sharing. Sunshine, how about you?
I think the thing that pulls me in is there are always moments in the show where I'm like, oh, Korra's really strong.
Yep.
And so the moment where it's like she's in platinum chain, she's been poisoned, the Avatar state starts to happen, and then they go to kill her, and she's able to fight it off.
Nope.
And then she yanks the chain out of the wall and starts slamming this rock via chain to across things, and starts fighting back. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. She's really good.
Yeah.
That was a great
I like
moment.
those moments, because I'm like, oh man, what's she gonna do? And I'm like, oh yeah, she's going to fight, and I we just get to see how strong she is, and I really like that moment. I don't love that she has to go through it, but I like that moment.
Fair.
A moment that pushes me away a little bit is I love the little Ocean's 11 plan that like the Airbender children have concocted, and then you don't get to really see it play out all the way because Team Avatar just like blows a rock through the wall, and you're like, all right, cool. So
they were gonna get out.
That was useless. So it's like one of those things where you're just kind of like, I really want to see how this plan continues, and then we don't have time for that. Rock wall hole thing happens, and now it's like, all right, everyone's free, and I'm like, I was really intrigued.
Yeah.
So that's a moment that pushes me away a little bit.
What a moment of balance for all of us to just
a good one.
think about the things that push us away and the things that pull us in. But We can't linger here forever, so we're going to move on to our devotion.
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 Through fire.
And authority.
Yeah.
So remember, everybody, this is our moment where we are setting an intention for the coming week based off of the discussion. We have discussed this, and we don't want to just be a discussion. We want there to be action behind this. So we want there to be something that we are doing this week that is putting our learning into practice. And the way we do that is by setting an intention. We set a goal that we want to accomplish or think on in the coming week. And this week, we are thinking about fire and authority. So, Sunshine, since you went last time, I want you to go first this time. Can you tell us about an intention that you're setting?
Yeah, I think mine is, I really love the concept of questioning whose authority or who has the ability to give this authority, right? And so it makes me want to question, well, who says that's the way that has to happen? And in my head, I'm viewing that as just starting little fires and then letting them burn. It's just
see how far they burn.
It's just kind of being
does it?
Who says? And just by doing that, just a little fire. Just we're gonna take this idea that has been a construct of whatever it might be for a long time.
Some things need to be burned to the ground.
And that's what I'm saying. Even if it's in my own life, if there's something that I've been doing a certain way because I feel like it has to be done that way, it's questioning that. Well, who says? And if it needs to get set on fire and burned, then
Great.
Let it happen. And that doesn't mean there's not things where it's well, why do we have to do it this way? Well, because there's data that supports it, and then there's more data that supports it, and then we've seen the success of when we do it this way that it happens, and then you go, okay, we'll keep that. But there are some things we can just go, no, burn it. I don't want that anymore. And so I think for this week, it's where can I find those moments of burn it, and then how do I help other people burn those things too? We're gonna set some things on fire this week.
I like it.
Gods, bro.
Yeah. I'm here for it.
That's my plan.
All right, Alex, what about you?
Yeah, my intention, let's see. Well, the element of fire, if I have this right, I think corresponds to the wand suit in the tarot deck, conventionally. And I got a really powerful tarot reading a few years ago, and in the I think it's called the Celtic Cross, the arrangement in which the cards are presented. There's one card that kind of, in the context of my reading, captured something about my sort of attitude towards what I was working towards in my life, and it was the Seven of Wands. And in the Rider-Waite deck, the Seven of Wands is a man standing on an elevated on sort of a prominence, like a boulder or something, and he's holding a wand, and there's 6 people trying to sort of come after him, and it's about and he's sort of fending them off with his wand, and maintaining ground that he's gained, I guess, and using his aggression in a presumably healthy way. And so it really stuck with me, and it's an image that I come back to when I feel like I'm straying from my sort of core intentions, and letting myself get distracted, letting myself kind of get bogged down with conflict and sort of second guessing. And so, as you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I'm in the midst of this, chaplaincy training program. I'm actually very close to being done, but I'm really in a sort
Congrats.
of... Thank you very much. I'm in a kind of crunch time right now where I have several small papers due and a big thesis due, and I've been kind of shrinking from that a little bit just because it's stressful to think about. And so this week I'm gonna try to attack a very specific try to meet a very specific writing goal. I'm gonna try to write three papers, and I'm working towards being a chaplain, so there's some kind of authority in there that'll come with that, and I'll have to spend the rest of my life asking whether I deserve to have it. So
yeah, I love it. Fire is bold, and you are choosing boldness. I love it. Okay, yeah, for me, when I'm thinking about fire here, and we've done several of these at this point, I'm thinking about authority feels very cold to me, but fire is
warm.
It's not. It's like the opposite. And so I'm thinking about how Sunshine, come on, give me a minute. Fire is hot.
No, I'm loving this. Continue.
And I want to lean into the power of fire. And oftentimes, fire can burn, but also fire is something that we can share among people, and when we share fire, it can help other people feel warm, right? And I don't think that's accomplished through authority as often as I would like it to be. I think that's accomplished through other means more readily. Better leadership often stems from influence, right? Saying, hey, I want to keep everybody warm, and so here's some of this fire, and I'm going to lend it to you, and I'm not going to be any worse because fire continues to grow, and does not need to be hoarded. So I'm thinking about how can I continue to light other people's fires while continuing mine from burning out. That is something that I want to be mindful of this week.
Can I share something really quick? Just because
yeah.
I take my license as guest to go off script a little bit. Do either of you know who Daniel Dennett is? He's a philosopher.
Nope.
Philosopher of mind, and he's written a lot about cognitive science. So I, a long time ago, got to go to this like dinner party or something after a colloquium, and somebody asked Daniel Dennett if he could run any experiment, what would it be? Like if the cost of running the experiment or the logistics were not a concern, what would he really love to see? And he said he would really love to see how long a group of non-human primates, let's say apes, can keep a fire going.
Interesting.
Right, because it's presumably something that humans uniquely among primates were able to do, and in some sense are still doing, and that's sort of like the story of Prometheus captures this. Like, we've been keeping this fire going by sharing it.
Yeah.
And non-human primates have obviously not, but could they learn to? Is the question that he had, which I've thought about a lot in the almost 20 years since that encounter. But anyway, I thought I would just throw that in because I haven't thought about it in a long time.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sharing fire. We got fire sharing. It's great. Apes may or may not be able to. I am grateful that I can. Oh, segue. We are going to be talking about gratitude now. I'm really excited because this is one of my favorite things that we do. So let's talk about some gratitude. Let's start with I've started. Sunshine started. It is your turn, Alex. Who are you grateful for?
Well, since I'm the guest, I'm going to take the one that we're all thinking, which is Jinora. She's
fair. That is fair.
She's just like an awesome character this whole series.
Yep.
She's just a really, really great character, and I'm really happy that she's part of my life.
Yeah, I am so grateful for Jinora. So retweet. And for me, someone I'm really grateful for in this episode also is Su-Yin. Su-Yin has several moments that just seem to just float by if you aren't paying attention. She talks like in this really caring voice to Tenzin, saying, "Don't worry, I will rescue these kids. I will rescue the airbenders. I am here to help make sure that they will be safe." And then she follows through, and then she helps them, and then at the end she's the one who is ultimately able to, having never done this before, extract most of the poison from Korra's body. And I think that we really gotta lift up our hands and clap for Su-Yin. I'm just really grateful that she was there and able in this episode. Sunshine, how about you?
I think I'm cheating.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning. I want to give gratitude to the power of a collective.
That's cheating.
But like, I think it's important, right? So to see what happens when we work together as community, and the positive nature that brings to what we're doing, and we see that throughout this episode of what happens when we truly work in tandem with those that we're in community with, and I think that's just too powerful to overlook and not lift up. And so the collective is all the airbenders is currently my gratitude.
Yeah, and just echoing that for Jinora, who was able to harness that power.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And so again, Jinora, MVP of the series.
Well, y'all, Alex, thanks for joining us on the last episode of this season.
Yeah, big deal. Big
Yeah,
deal.
thank you
If
very
we
much
want to
for
send
inviting me.
people to you, if people want to find you or you want them to find you, where could they do that?
Yeah, I guess I'm on Instagram, and sometimes I post things that aren't just about how cute my dog is, and so but even that people might want to see. So my handle is Alex B Fine, B as in boy, Alex B Fine, and then that's also my. I have a blog where I write things sometimes. It's just alexbfine.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. Remember,
Yeah,
everybody,
thank
you
you.
can also find us at BNB_pod. We are on all the things, including Instagram, Twitter, TikTok.
Yep.
We have a Facebook group. We have a Patreon that you can support us on. We are trying to cultivate a large enough stipend to pay our producer a living wage, and we aren't there yet.
No,
So I would love for that to happen.
He's very grateful to do things on a volunteer basis, but we
I would like
we
for
would
him
love
not
to,
to.
yeah.
Yeah, he does a lot of work,
Yeah,
and
that's
I
nice.
want that
That's a
to
nice
be
goal.
compensated. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you are hearing this and you have some extra fundies, feel free to add them to our coffers via, Patreon. Also, there's cool perks, so that's cool. You should-
live episodes,
lots of cool stuff.
fun stuff.
Okay, we did it. We
We
did it,
did.
everybody.
Thanks for another wonderful season. I'm Sunshine Mayfield,
I'm Ben Pruitt.
and this has been Bending, Not Breaking. Thank you for listening.
Goodbye.